Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. Iran denies receiving any ultimatum from President Trump on negotiations. Meanwhile, Tehran summons EU ambassadors after the bloc labels the Revolutionary Guards a terrorist group. Israel says the Rafah crossing will open today for limited medical transfers from Gaza. Only 150 people a day are allowed to exit, with 50 permitted to enter from Egypt. Russia says its offer to extend New START limits remains on the table with the United States. Moscow calls territory the hardest issue in Ukraine talks and rejects any NATO force presence there as three sides gear up for new talks in Abu Dhabi. Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte faces fresh impeachment complaints. Activists allege corruption and abuse of trust as she eyes the 2028 presidency. Right-wing candidate Laura Fernandez wins Costa Rica's presidential election in a landslide. She secures a first-round victory after pledging a hard crackdown on violence linked to drug trafficking. Former UK ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, resigns from the Labour Party. The move follows fresh reports about his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Bad Bunny uses his Grammy acceptance speech to denounce US immigration raids. The Puerto Rican star tells the crowd migrants are human and American too. China executes 4 members of the Bai family mafia linked to scam centers in Myanmar. The move is part of a broad crackdown on transnational fraud networks. We start this hour with some breaking news coming in from East Asia, and China's former Justice Minister Tang Yujun has been sentenced to life in prison over taking bribes. Earlier in 2024, the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection of China had accused Tang of helping family members secure financial deals and accepting lavish gifts and expenses. He was accused of violating the Communist Party's code of conduct and was consequently expelled from the party. Tang allegedly sought to benefit others in personal appointments by accepting bribes, used his position to help family members secure business contracts, and intervened in market activities and judicial matters. We'll bring you all the news coming out of Beijing in terms of that story as soon as we get it. But now over to West Asia, and Iran has said that a framework for negotiations with the United States is expected to be finalized in the coming days, while firmly denying reports of any ultimatum from President Donald Trump. Speaking from Tehran, the Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai said Iran has not received any ultimatum on talks. He added that regional countries are acting as mediators in the exchange of messages and that several points have already been addressed. According to Baqai, the details of each stage in the diplomatic process are now being examined and finalized. Meanwhile, President Trump has said he hopes to reach a deal with Tehran even as the United States continues to strengthen its military presence near the Islamic Republic. Joining us now to discuss the ongoing situation in the Middle East and its tensions with Washington is Peter Baum, the editor of the Weekly Blitz, joining us live from London. Thank you very much for joining us, Peter. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, we've seen a war of words between the US president and Iranian officials, including, of course, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Is this the opening of real diplomacy here after weeks of the sparring matches, or simply managed de-escalation under threat?
It could be either, Thomas. The best outcome for the Trump administration would be regime change without firing a shot. Trump and the European Union and indeed Russia and China recognise that Iran is probably at its weakest ever, militarily and politically, for, let's be realistic, since 5 decades. Um, Added with the domestic insurgency and what we've seen over the weekend with the explosions, um, Trump's has all the aces in his hand, and the Iranians have very, very little. So, if there is to be a diplomatic outcome via negotiations, then it will probably be so unpalatable for the Iranians because, as I've just said, Trump is in a dominant position, building up forces. Politically, Iran are isolated. Domestically, as we know, there's virtually a revolution going on. So it's difficult to see what the Iranians would be able to achieve from a diplomatic solution. Will Trump allow them to stay in power and give up their nuclear, providing they gave up their nuclear weapons and perhaps had new elections, something like that? One doesn't know. But I think that the Trump will demand such decisive political realizations for the Iranians, it would be very hard for them to swallow. I believe that it will lead to some kind of military operation because I don't think the Iranian mullahs will give up to the demands that President Trump is going to request of them.
Okay, Peter, do stay with us as we move on to another development from the region. And thousands of sick and wounded Palestinians are waiting anxiously as Israel reopens Gaza's Rafah border with Egypt for limited crossings. The terminal, closed for nearly 2 years, will operate about 6 hours a day. Only 150 people will be allowed to leave Gaza daily, while around 50 are expected to enter. The reopening allows an October ceasefire deal, but movement remains tightly restricted, with Israel retaining full control over the border. Many families hope to reunite despite Gaza's devastation, while others face life or death waits for treatment abroad. Health officials say at least 20,000 patients are still waiting evacuation, and some have already died while waiting. Joining us now once again is Peter Baum to discuss the ongoing situation in the enclave. Peter, I've spoken about this before, but of course, so the first phase, which is now done, called for unrestricted flow of aid into the enclave, yet humanitarian aid is still very much restricted. Of course, a famine is no longer declared there. However, the humanitarian crisis is still rife throughout the population of Gaza, with malnourishment very much still prevalent. Israel now letting a very limited opening of the Rafah corridor, a key and crucial place for humanitarian aid entering the enclave, but only limited. This is supposed to be unrestricted. Why is Israel still limiting these crossings?
Yeah, this will be a step-by-step process. When the when the Rafah crossing, when it was decided that it was going to be open, there was never any intent from either the Egyptian side or the Israeli side that there will be a free flow of goods and people. It was always going to be a step-by-step process. It's a start, Thomas. Obviously, from the Palestinian point of view, they would want it to be expedited and to allow more and more people through. If after the first couple of days, let's say a week, the crossings go through unhindered and without any cause for concern from Israelis being attacked from the Hamas operatives, I suspect that if we're talking about the same situation this time next week, it will be a much clearer, more transparent and more open situation with many more people and goods going to and from. But at the moment, it would all the political analysts that I've spoken to, and indeed from colleagues in the Israeli press and in the Egyptian press, it was always going to be a step-by-step process. It's a start, but clearly, and from where we were, Thomas, it's quite remarkable that this has happened at all. But I would imagine in the days ahead, we'll see a much wider, more comprehensive free flow of goods and people.
Israel have all the hostages back, including those of the deceased. Health officials in the enclave saying 20,000 patients are still waiting evacuation, and with only 150 people allowed to leave per day. This isn't fast enough, really, is it? We've heard that some people have died from waiting. Do you think Israel will speed up the process anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure they will. I would put a warning signal about the numbers of people that are needing treatment and the numbers of people are dying, etc. It's rather similar to when we were speaking a few months ago about the number of people dying from famine, etc. There are restaurants opening in Gaza all the time now. There's sufficient food for everybody. In terms of the people who are sick and need treatment via the border crossing, yes, clearly more needed and more need to go through. But I suspect this will be done in the days ahead, provided, Thomas, there are no incidents at the border crossing. If you remember, when the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation were giving food out and taking over from other NGOs, there were incidents leading to deaths. We hope that this won't be the case at Rafah, and we do know that the Egyptians are also taking a very strong view regarding security on their side of the border. So, as I say, if we're speaking about the same issue this time next week, I suspect it will be a much better situation for all concerned.
Okay, Peter Baum, thank you very much for joining us. As always, it is a great pleasure to speak to you. We now move on and over to Eastern Europe, and Russia's Dmitry Medvedev has warned that nuclear weapons remain a last resort option if the country's survival is at stake. In an interview, he said that Russia acts strictly according to its nuclear doctrine, which outlines conditions under which nuclear arms can be used. Medvedev emphasized that while nuclear weapons are extremely dangerous for all humanity, no one should doubt that Russia would consider them if the nation faced an existential threat. We turn now to South Asia, and the Balochistan Liberation Army has claimed responsibility for a massive coordinated offensive across Pakistan's Balochistan province, allegedly killing more than 200 security personnel over a period of nearly 40 hours. The group said the attacks, called Operation Heroth Phase 2, targeted multiple districts and marked the first large-scale use of female suicide bombers. Pakistani authorities confirmed heavy fighting and said security forces killed at least 145 militants. Officials also reported civilian casualties after attackers disguised as civilians entered public places and used human shields. The violence highlights a sharp escalation in the long-running insurgency in Balochistan. Professor Veselin Popovsky joins us now, a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from Thailand. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us. This was a significant operation. 145 what Pakistan calling militants, terrorists, dead over the span of 40 hours. What does this signify about the stability of the Balochistan region? Of course, a hub of insurgency and instability for decades now.
Oh yes, definitely for decades. It's a very long conflict. I think there are 4 rounds of escalation, and since 2006 already 20 years ago, we have the fourth round of escalation. It's long, and there is not really much of a hope it will end soon because of both sides giving absolutely no indication stopping doing that. On one side, the attacks on Pakistani forces by Balochistan Liberation Army, and on the other hand, the response to that by the official Pakistani army against what they call the terrorists of Balochistan. And yes, it's one of the longest conflicts in Pakistan with no clear signals for any resolution. There is no dialogue whatsoever. It basically, both sides prefer to do the military options and not to negotiate any compromise. So we will see probably more of this over the next years, I'm afraid.
As you've said, there seems to be not much effort to get this instability sorted. In Pakistan's largest province by area, it's also its poorest, with chronic underdevelopment, despite major gas, coal, copper and gold reserves. And what does it say about the current way that this conflict is moving forward, that insurgency continues to operate in Balochistan, and that there seems to be no or not much interest from external actors to settle this dispute?
True, you're absolutely right, Thomas. There is not much interest internationally. In fact, I speak about this. There is no political interest in any other parts of the world in Balochistan. Left on its own, yes, the conflict has very little, as I mentioned, very little chances to have any progress very soon. You are right. It's one of the poorest parts of Pakistan, but with potentially possible reserves in resources and minerals. And for that matter, maybe that also explains the causes of conflict. Very often the causes of conflicts lie in some such opportunities to exploit mineral resources by insurgencies, and they would like to take control of those regions. Again, they can pretend some other reasons, some revenge, some frustrations from the past, some willingness to establish independent state. But obviously behind all of this are the resources, but also the violent methods that the Balochistan Liberation Army uses give even less sympathy. So in a way, nobody sympathizes with attempts to secessions. Moreover, when the violent means by killing people, and sometimes very many civilians also, doesn't really give a rise for sympathy, for international support, for international sympathy to independence of Balochistan. And we also know that the Pakistani state is absolutely cruel, and that they will also not consider any steps back, that they will continue to respond with strikes, with killing fighters. That's also the approach that Pakistan takes. So sadly to say, not much to expect here. It will be a prolonged, although not always we see that. So that's why we have several times, as I said, over the last decade, an escalation. But at the end of the day, yes, no prospect at the moment.
Professor Popovsky, finally, of course, the escalation comes with accusations of Pakistan claiming that India is financing certain proxy groups and especially these Baloch insurgents inside Balochistan. A claim India denies, while Indian officials accuse Pakistan of using similar proxies against India. Where's the base in these accusations?
Again, that's not verified. These are accusations. There is no proof. There is no evidence. Unfortunately, it goes on for long. And as you mentioned, India also sometimes immediately raises those accusations every time there is a terrorist act in India. The first reaction is that Pakistan state, it could be Pakistan insurgent or terrorist, someone from Pakistan, but the question really is whether the state is involved. And for that matter, we don't know. We have no evidence to say that Indian state is involved in any sort, enough evidence to say that the Pakistani state, the state of Pakistan, is supporting some terrorist act in India. Yes, the relationship between India and Pakistan, notoriously for many decades, is kind of a ground for such mutual accusations that, again, do not bring to any solution. And it's better to have some restraint, some self-disciplines in those announcements. But again, both sides have a lot of nationalism, a lot of populism, and that kind of builds up mutual hatred and often unverified accusations continue.
Professor Veselin Popovsky, thank you very much for taking the time in joining us. Great pleasure to talk to you, as always. We now move on and over to the Pacific, and Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte is facing a new round of impeachment complaints, accused of betraying public trust, corruption and other crimes. Rights groups and activists filed the complaints following a similar bid last year that was blocked by the Supreme Court. Duterte, who is the frontrunner for the 2028 presidential election, denied the allegations. Her lawyer said that they are prepared to address the complaints through constitutional processes. Meanwhile, the move comes as Duterte remains in a bitter political battle with a former ally, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who cannot run again but is expected to back a successor. The new effort faces stricter Supreme Court procedures in a Senate with more Duterte allies, making it a more challenging process. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.